If you have your Bibles, please turn with me to the book of Genesis. We're going to start on Genesis, our discussion in the book on the chapters dealing with Abraham. Or I should say Abram. Abram first, because that's what his name was before God changed it to Abraham. Abraham was a man that was unique, I would say. We think about Abraham and we know some of the places he lived, we know some of the places he traveled, and we can go back to those very spots if we want to. But he was a man, if you look at the genealogy and everything, he was someone, when he was young, could have met and may have talked to somebody that was in the ark. Does that make sense? He was in that time where people was transferring from being 900, 800 years old till they got lower in age, to finally got to where God said that most people would live to be 120 was the lifespan. Today, I guess there's some people that have claimed, or they say there's a few, but most people, when they get to be 100, we need to try to go see them, don't we? How many of us, we realize that. How many of you have had a family member to live to be 100 years of age? A few of us. I had one of my great-grandfathers live to be 101. Most of our family died in the 70s and 80s. Just when the older ones. But we can see back then they lived to be old at first. Abraham was of the lineage of the good people. Those that tried to follow God in some ways. We don't know why God chose Abraham and gave him the promises that he did. Other than we can see that it says that he listened to God. Today, I think a great person today would be anybody that listens to what? To God. Most people don't like to listen. If you worked in the school system as an officer, Brother David, and you saw so oftentimes you would find that kids would not listen with it. They wouldn't listen. Sometimes you could tell them something, they wouldn't do it. Basically, they used to say when I was young, they wanted kids to go into the army, young men to go into the army. And a lot of times they wanted them to go to the army so they would listen. And I think it did a lot of good for a lot of kids because a lot of them didn't listen. We're going to look at and see what happened. We looked there in 12. And then Abraham and his father, they left Ur of the Chaldees and they went to Haran up at the top of what we call the Bible world at the beginning of the river Euphrates. And they was up there. And when they lived there, it says, now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. So he had been down in Ur of the Chaldees, down in the world waterness of what we call the Fertile Crescent, the land where we know there was great buildings and houses and cities and running water that was there at that time. It was civilization. Does that make sense? And he told him, he says, go to a land and I will show you. Now, look at 2. Verse 2 is a key. Matter of fact, what we are going to read in the next few verses is what the rest of the Old Testament is about. And the New Testament is about these things that Abraham, this is based upon all the studies that we are going to do in the Old Testament, all the studies we do in the Gospels. is going to be based upon what was said here to Abraham. Isn't that right? First of all, he said this, to a land that I will show you, verse 2, I will make you a great nation. He said, I will make you a great nation. Not that his family was going to become, but from his own seed, there was going to be a great nation. He said, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. Not only, we can see that not only is he going to be blessed, but those that he's around going to be blessed. We see this later in these chapters. Where people, when he lived someplace, the people would be blessed if they treated them right, and not blessed if they didn't. But look at this. He said, first of all, he said the promise. God said, this is a prophecy. I will make you a what? Somebody said a prophecy. I like to say it was a promise. And then he says, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curse you. And then the last part of this word, the Lord speaking, he said this, and in you all the families of the earth shall be what? Blessed. In you. We're going to go later on in this study, we're going to find it says, in your seed. But he started out by saying, in you shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Noah saved mankind, right? But through the seed of Abraham, the world was going to be offered salvation through his seed. So we look at this. And so Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him. But it said this. Now this, do you think faith grows in a person? Has your Christian faith grew since you've been a Christian? If it hadn't, you're in trouble. Because when a tree stops growing, it is what? Yeah. It's dying. It won't be dead first. It's dying. It stops growing. It's not long, it's going to be dead. But so it is here, because God told him to leave his homeland, but he said, leave your homeland and your what? Family. He had a little trouble with that. He had a little trouble because he left his homeland, but he took Lot, his what? Nephew, with him. He took his, notice it says, so Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. How about that? How many of you at 75 wants to go out and settle in a new country? How many want to at 55 go out? But what we see here, he was still physically able to do so much. We even see later on that he leads an army against the army at the age of over 75. He was physically what? Fit. But then it says, then Abraham took Sarah, his wife, and Lot his brother's sons, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. The only thing I can describe this at is out where I come from, out west in Colorado, and some of those places. Some of them old people out there, ranchers in Colorado and Wyoming, you ask them, say, where did y'all come from? I'm expecting them to say from Ireland or England. But most of them Wyoming, Montana ranchers, you know what they tell you they came from? Texas. I'm not kidding you. Texas. Most of their families came from Texas. That is, after the Civil War, they went down and they was opened up the West. Most of Montana ranchers, their grandparents down, great-grandparents down. Yeah, that's where they came. Oh, they came from Texas because they moved up there. Here we can see Abraham. He went in from down here, went to Haran. His family was up there. And then he had to leave the family and go down to what? To the land of Canaan. A land that was going to be promised to him. He's a part of it. And he says, and Abraham passed through the land. Oh, and by the way, I said this because look, when he was up there, he was like a rancher. He didn't go up there with just 3 people. He took all of his flock people and cattle people, and he took the whole possessions and went with him. He didn't just do like these farmers and these ranchers in Texas. They didn't just move to Montana. They took everything they had. They took their cows. They took their cowboys. They took everything and did what? Moved to Montana. So this was a migration of a family, and then his hard hands and all going down to that. And it says Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem and formed as the tree of Moab, and the Canaanites was then in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, notice what he said, to your descendants I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. He said, I'm going to give you all this land. Now he had a few dozen people with him. But the Canaanites at that time had cities. And God said, I'm going to give this all to you. This would be... Now God promised, I don't think Abram went out and told the Canaanites, hey, God gave me all your houses and stuff. I don't think he probably did that. Matter of fact, God gave it, I'm going to give you we're going to go ahead because I want to keep this. I want you to go ahead on that verse. I want you to go to chapter 15 and verse 16. He talks about in 16 that the nation was going to happen, but the people's not going to get it. They're going to go in and serve another nation for some 400 years. But he says, verse 16, but in the 4th generation, they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So he told them he's going to get it. Then later on, he told them, he said, now they're going to get the land. You're going to get the land, your descendant, but it's going to be what? In 4 generations. By the way, the generation back then we can already see was about 100 years. So we can see that promise. So the promise of being a great nation coming. Can you see what happened here? I don't know how he had as much faith as he did. He had a wife and no kids. 75 years old, probably been married a good while. But guess what? No kids. Hey, you're going to have a great nation when it comes to you. Then he had to come down to a place that had walled cities. And he told him, he said, now all this is going to be yours. And then after all that, he still kept faith and believed in God, even though he told him, he said, oh yeah, you're going to get this, but it's going to be in 4 generations. We are kind of, I don't know, but most people wouldn't worry about a whole lot of things to try to get for your great-grandchild. But the thing about it is, he was a man. The greatest faith about Abraham was a man, I think, Mark, was that he looked forward past his own lifetime. We live in America, and especially here, we live in and I say America, we live in a throwaway society. How many think a throwaway society? Chris Martin was a little bit upset because when his daddy retired, they put a new office building that he was over all the what do you call it, the parole officers. They put up a new building over in Orlando, and they named it after Martin. It was the Martin building. Named it after Bruce's dad. Isn't that something? When he retired. Bruce said the one thing that upset him and his daddy a little bit, his dad died just a few years ago, 30 years after he retired, or I don't know exactly. But the year before he retired, guess what they did to that new building that had his name on it? Tore it down. It was obsolete. They tore it down. Isn't that something? We think something that, is obsolete. You go to Europe and you go across bridges in Rome and other places, you can go to the buildings that was built almost to the time of Abraham, and you can go down roads and you can see buildings that was built back then. Isn't that something? But then we take a building that's old in this country, if it's 100 years old, don't we? Matter of fact, they built bridges. When I was working construction, they built bridges. And they used to brag. They said, yep, that bridge is going to last 100 years. I used to say, wow. And now I go over it, I look for cracks because it's been over 50. That bridge, they carry them trucks, carry all that stuff over it, year after year after year. It's half used up. According to what, and I'm really, we have that. But here, Abraham, he looked, he trusted God, he had faith. Faith is the substance of things what? Hoped for but not seen. Not seen. I think this is the greatest thing about Abraham. Now, I haven't heard this emphasized by other people, but I think, am I right, Mark? Do you see what I'm talking about? I mean, he had this. He was living for the future and dying for what he hadn't seen. But he left the homeland, so he stayed there because of what was going to come. In a like way, we today, we live looking forward to heaven. We have, it's almost the same kind of faith that Abraham had, isn't it? It's promised, but we can't see it. And it may not be here for 400 years. I don't know, and you don't either. But we know it is what? Coming. The great faith of this man. So I went from 12, I know, all the way over, but let's go back and we look at basically what happened. I'd like to go down to 13, where Abraham went up from Egypt. He went down to Egypt, and there it says Lot was with him. In verse 2 it says Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in what? Gold. The Lord was continuing to bless him. And we can see what happened was that what happened there, it says, look at verse 4. I looked for into the place of the altar he had made there at first. And there Abraham, I love it, Abraham called on the name of the Lord. He called on the name of the Lord. We don't understand sometimes the importance of calling on the name of the Lord. We say prayers, sometimes of thankfulness, right? And that's good to say prayers of thanks. But sometimes we have to, how many of us have called on the name of the Lord? Mark, you know how many people, when you were sick over there and the doctor looked at you, and even he had a sad face.
The video went off.
Do what?
The video went off. The report.
Well, we don't know what, you know. We don't know what happened to it. So now I can say anything I wanted, y'all can't hold it against me, won't prove. No proof for anything I say now. So watch out. So, where was I at now? Well, he called on we today call on the name of the Lord. But there's a difference between giving thanks for the food and then calling on. How many of us, like Barbara's, going through, I've been calling on the name of the Lord for her and for the doctors and everything going on. Because she's scared. I mean, she is. I'm scared. Because I don't know much about it and anything else. But the thing about it is, how many times have we, when someone is sick, when one of our grandkids or our loved one, any of them are sick, what do? We call on the name of the Lord. Now, we don't see anything here, but the thing about it is, how many of you have had the doctor come in? I've been with people where the doctor's been in there where they had a major surgery, some person had major heart or cancer or something, and the doctor had came out of the room and said, okay, I've done all I can, now you just have to pray. I can remember when I was a young man, the doctor came out and said that to somebody, and he looked at him and said, I prayed before you ever got in the hospital room. I prayed for him first. You were sinking. Because a lot of times we fail to realize we need to call on the Lord and that doctor come back. Now you don't pray before the doctor. You pray for the doctor before the surgery starts, don't you? A lot of times that's what it's about. He called on the name of the Lord before, well, like he just said, he had all the cattle, he had all this. Then he went and did what? Then he called on the name of the Lord. He didn't pray, he didn't give thanks, but he called on the Lord. So oftentimes people fail to realize when we are down and out, when we are sick, when we have lost our job, when we lost our home, when we are destitute, no matter where then we say, well, I need to pray to God. No, you need to pray to God when you got the house, when you got the job. Then that's when you need to call on God. And you need to give thanks to God, but you need to call on Him to help you. Let's face it, the more you got, I think the Bible kind of leans towards the more you got, maybe it's the harder it is to follow God. I see the Tower of Babel. When they started building it, the higher they got, the more cocky they got against God, thinking they could do it. That got them in trouble. And so we need to have that attitude. So in 3, I think the important thing is what he did. He called on the name of the Lord, and then he allowed Lot. Because Lot's people and his people, herdsmen, started fussing. Because they were so great. So Abraham looked at Lot and said, choose you which direction you want to go. You choose, you go to the left, I go to the right, you go to the right. And so Lot chose the well-watered plains of what we call the Dead Sea. And most people say the Dead Sea back then was probably only half the size that it is now. The rest of it was just well-watered, perfect grassland for livestock. And I think it was last week or sometime I talked about Lot being the oldest. And I looked that up, did some dirt. people said they can't be for sure, but it was the standard practice that the oldest got first choice. And we don't know if he was, but some people think the way Lot treated him, he treated Lot. Lot was maybe old. Now somebody said, but that was his nephew. Well, I hate to tell you, I have 4 cousins that was older than my uncle. Is that happening? Did any of you know of a family that has kids older than their uncles? It used to be a common thing, wasn't it? You got to remember, my dad had 5 brothers. My dad had 5 brothers, and each one of them had 5 sisters. How many is in the family? How many kids? My dad had 5 brothers, and each one of them had 5 sisters. How many was in the family? How many kids? 11. My dad was there too. He had 5 brothers. But anyway, that's what. But I can remember so oftentimes some of my cousins. It was neat. They was when I was a little tyke. They was 2 years ahead of their uncle. And they used to call him. And I always called my uncle my baby uncle. Somebody said, why? Because that's what the big kids call him, baby uncle, because he was a baby uncle. So, but chapter 13, we can see that they separated. And a lot, so we have chapter 13, the most important thing I think is that Abram called on God. Then Lot also chose the good land to go to. And Abraham was fine with that. He went the other way. And then in chapter 14, we're going to look at there where there was war. Common practice of the day, when the city-states and the small countries, they would go to war. I know it sounds funny, they would go to war every spring and summer. After they planted the crops, they go to war. That's like the American Indians used to. All tribes. And they would go to war. They went to war, some came down and they went to Sodom and Gomorrah and they took Lot, his family and everything with them. And the 5 kings was against the 4 kings and all this happened. But then in chapter 14, when it happened, Abram took his men of his house and he went and attacked them and got Lot and all of them back, right? And then we are going to see here, I know I jumped you ahead to chapter 15 a while ago. It says the sins of the Amorites are not yet full. I'm going to show you why he said that statement. Because we look in chapter 14 and verse 18, one of the most important characters of Genesis is Melchizedek, or Melchizedek, either way you want to say it. It says, then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of what? God Most High. He was, now notice the Bible calls him not a priest of a God, but the priest of the God what? Most High. And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who have delivered your enemy into your what? In your hands. So we can see here that there was a God, there was a priest. If there was a priest, I hate to tell you this, if there was a priest there who was a priest of the Most High God and he was also the king, there was probably people there worshiping the Most High God, don't you think? You know how I know that the county over there you was in had a sheriff? Because he was the deputy sheriff. Right? Deputy sheriff means there is a what? Sheriff. A priest means there's a congregation. There was, now, I don't know how many, But the thing about it is, there was enough of them there that God was not going to take the land away from them and give it to him and the people that he promised. He said, wait, because they're going to sin, but now the sins are not yet full. And this is something that is, the statement, of course, later on in Acts 16 and 17, and we see that Melchizedek, he was both a priest and a what? A king. That was not allowed during the Mosaic law. It happened before the law was given by Moses. But it couldn't happen under the Mosaic law. That was not allowed. But then, of course, when the law was nailed to the cross, then who became both priest and king? Jesus Christ. He is the priest and the what? The king. He is our priest, he is our king. And so that's in chapter 14. Then in chapter 15, we can have the covenant with Abraham. It says, he said, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, your excellent great reward. But Abraham said, Lord God, what will you give me? Shall I go childless? And the heir of my house be of this Damascus, a servant. He thought a servant was going to be the heir of his house. This is I know it sounds funny, but when I was a preacher out in the Oklahoma Panhandle, one of the deacons had 5,000 acres leased down on the Canadian River down in New Mexico. And we went down there to help them round up, and sometimes took the boys from church down there and camped up. And we would go over to a old hacienda. This man, I love this man. He was 80-some years old when I met him. When you went to his house, you had the stone little buildings around. You had the place for the sheep. I thought Zero was going to come out at any time. Because that's what it reminded you of when you went in the courtyard and saw everything. He had a store that his grandparents had built out of rock. It was a general store. He still had it. The only thing different was he did have a soda machine on one side. But they had a piece of wood. But I went in and got talking to him. He was 80-some years old. I said, first I said, how long you lived here? He said, all my life. He said, my daddy and I said, we got this land, my granddaddy, great-granddaddy got this from the Spanish government. It was an old land claim of the Mexican government. He'd been there before America was America. He had lived there. I said, wow. I said, how many of your family do you have? He said, well, Daddy, Mom had one girl, she died young, and then they had me. I said, man, how many kids you got? He said, none. None. I looked at him, he had no kids, 80-some years old. And during the 5 years that the guy had at least, we was going down there, the man died. I asked Brother Durham, I said, who got the land? I mean, he had thousands of acres. Not many, 18, 20,000. I said, who got the land? He said, he gave it to the guy from Mexico that had worked for him for 25 years, that had the 8 kids that was raised there. He said, he gave it to him. That's the closest kinfolk he had. I said, man, that's something. I don't know why, but when he told me that story, I thought of Abraham. Abraham. Abraham had something that the God told him, all this is going to be yours for a lot more than 18 to 20,000 acres. But he said, you promised me this, But here I am old and I don't have any children yet. But he told him, he said, no, you are going to what? He said, look, verse 5. He said, and he brought him outside and said, look down towards heaven and count the stars if you are able to number them. And then he said to him, so shall your descendants what? Be. And then I love number 6. He had doubt, but when the Lord came out, it says, and he what? Believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. He thought to himself, and still he didn't know it hadn't happened. But when the Lord looked up and showed him the stars, he said, okay, I won. Some things seem impossible to us, but they're not impossible to God. When I was chaplain in prison, I had men that told me that they thought it was impossible for God to save them. My class, the 60 men that was usually in worship service, over a third of them was in there for murder. Over a third of them was in there for murder. Some of them I had to convince them that even though the one old fella there had got high out of high school, shot 2 people, shot 2 highway patrols, was on death row, and then back in the 70s or 80s they outlawed it, so they gave him 4 400-year sentences stacked on top of one another. He had to serve 100 years, then another 100 years, then another 100 years, then another 100 years. When I knew him, he only had 350 something to go. But they asked him when he was sitting there, they asked me, they said, does it help us to come here? They said, help us for parole to look at us if we come to church. Well, parole look at it. I told him, I said, parole can look at anything they want, but this doesn't give you any points or anything else. This, as far as I know, it depends on who it is. I can't promise it's going to help you any. Old boy sitting in the second room, he just kind of spoke up. He said, I'm taking this so I can go home. And the other said, he said, no, I'm taking this so I can go home. And then they saw which way he was pointing. Home. He was been in there for 40-some years. He was 19. You figured out he was 70-some years old. But he was doing it so he could go home. Abraham was somebody that trusted God, trusted that his nation would be given to him, trusted that all through his seed, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. And we're going to see next week where he reminds him again and again. He keeps on reminding Abraham. If Abraham took a lot of reminding, don't feel bad that you and I need a lot of reminding too, okay? You think of Abraham having a lot of faith, right? But he was reminded once, reminded again, reminded again. Because faith in God is not something it's not something we just get. It's something that has to grow inside of us. It has to grow inside of us. The only way it can grow is through faith, yes, but from studying the power and the Word of God. It takes this man here, you know what he does? He grows grass. We call it hay. He grows grass. But you know the funny thing about it, I think it's great because grass, the Lord waters it, the water comes, the rain comes, and that's all he has to do. Oh, wait a minute. Do you have to fertilize it? He said, oh yeah. I have to fertilize it. The sunshine comes from the Lord, the rain comes from the Lord, but he needs to fertilize it, right? Now the bad thing is, he has to buy the fertilizer. The good thing about us, the fertilizer was paid for by Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Paid for by Jesus Christ our Lord. This word was paid for. It was ratified. It was completed, the contract by Jesus Christ our Lord.